and also the economy. Because the finance on the IPF is more on public finance, or public money, which is the economy. And I am glad to be in both, on the leadership side, but also on the economic front. In the politics side, it's easy, because you say things subjectively. You don't need to think too much. Anything can pass. You can say anything, it is subjective, it can be directed to somebody. You don't need any empirical evidence for whatever you say. On the economic front, you can easily embarrass yourself if you go off the facts. Because some of the things we deal with are factual. Many things that are can be numerated, things that can be put in figures, unfortunately. Whatever verbosity you put around it, whatever speech you may put around it, 2 + 2 always is 4. Whatever you describe for as, it will end up as 4. So I'm very glad that we are discussing that. And the fact that it shapes the other. Politics shapes the economy, but on the other side also, the economy shapes politics. The more advanced a country becomes, the more aware the people become, and the more uwajibikaji in terms of the politics that is enhanced. And therefore, there is a very thin line if there is at all. We are in a situation which is very good in terms of global economy. And I've been studying economies over time, and I can confidently say that the global economy now is in summer. It's in summer because there is nothing much in terms of the downside that is ongoing in the global economy. And therefore it presents a very good opportunity for every secular economy of the world to take advantage of the summer to do what they need to do. Why do I say so? Currently, in terms of stability, other than the wars that the economists have already factored in, the economies of the world has already factored in what is ongoing in the Middle East. The economies of the world have already factored in what is happening around somewhere near Europe. We've already factored in that as economies. And fortunately, even in terms of supply chains and in terms of planning, that is already there, and it has been for years. So we have some stability in regards to the global geopolitics. When you look at the economy globally also, we are now in a sphere and in a path of decimated reading rates in terms of lowering of reading rates across almost all the economies of the world. There is quantitative easing across. The Federal Reserve will be meeting, I think, next week, if not this week. Actually, this week, the Federal Reserve of the US. And whatever that meeting will come up with affects my grandmother's plate in the village, affects many things that we do in our economy. The pity is that there is great expectation that we are likely continue with quantitative easing, will likely continue with expansionary policies in the monetary side in terms of lowering of the lending rates, starting from the Fed rate, CPR rate, and of course, supposed also to go to the private sector, supposed to. So the economies of the world we are buoyant. I mean, we have all the ingredients of an economy to grow. All of them are on the table. When you have rates going down, rates go down because private sector wants to be incentivized. And all those are happening now. In Kenya, we have CPR rates going down. Across almost all the economies in Africa and all the other economies of the world, we have that happening. Expansionary policies are now, and especially on the monetary side. The question we need to ask ourselves as Kenyans, as we enjoy the summer in the economic sphere of the world, how is Kenya taking advantage of that? And just use the data. One, we have had CBR rate coming down. Every other meeting, if not sustaining the previous rate, we are climbing down. But who is benefiting from the lowering of the lending rates in Kenya? And when I talk about economics, I like referring to the government data, because the beauty is that we still have some institutions that give credible data, and especially the CPK and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Now, we have a situation where Kenya is having expansionary monetary policy and lowering of lending rates. But who is benefiting? Because you have on one side lowering of rates, the same government data then shows that the private sector lending is actually going down, not growing. So in Kenya, monetary easing is purely a debt management tool. Purely. That the only parameter that is being eyed in terms of monetary easing and lowering of rates is basically paying less interest in the domestic debt, and therefore what is supposed to happen is not happening, because always rates should go down as a way of incentivizing private sector. But you have rates going down, but in the same breath and from the same source, then we have a report again on the other side showing that the lending to private sector in Kenya is actually shrinking. And therefore that is a very huge cause of alarm, because we must harness whatever is happening globally, because it doesn't last for too long. Second thing that we have to be aware of, so that we take advantage of what we have now. Economies are always cyclical. Right now, President Trump is almost forcing the Fed that they have to cut the rates. And they will almost, I'm sure they will succumb this week. Now, after that, how is the economy supposed to now behave after that? We have low rates. We will definitely, again, in the next few months, start having a discussion about managing inflation, because those go hand in hand together. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we need to harness what we have now as an advantage globally, make a way of making our private sector buoyant and grow, so that in a rainy day, we'll have institutions that will support our economy. But when it is sunshine, we still cannot give warmth to the business sector or the private sector, because the government is crowding out the private sector from banking, from lending. In our economic, I mean the easiest chapters of economics, we were told one of the roles of government and a central bank is to release money to the people through many tools, including fiscal policy in terms of spending. So we grew up knowing that the work of central bank, in quotes, is to print money, in quotes because it's figurative, and figure out how this money will end up in my pocket. Through many ways, spending, through financial instruments, and the rest. In Kenya, that has reversed. The work of the central bank now and government is actually to mop up money from the private pocket and then give to the government. That is why you see every month we are having fundraisings from government in terms of raising money. And what has that brought now, up to now? Out of those things that I'm talking about, our national debt now has grown to 12 trillion Kenya shillings. Over. It's now, because we borrow every day on average, maybe we are now talking about 12.4 trillion Kenya shillings. A higher figure from the previous times that we talked about debt. And I talked about these figures the other day, which are factual again. And every Kenyan, the beauty about Kenya now is that we may have shortfalls, but at least the Constitution guarantees that we get part of the public information for free when you need it. So, The current debt is over 12 trillion shillings. So in a year we are borrowing 1.25 trillion Kenya shillings. And by the way, last year, government went against the law and overborrowed more than it had been budgeted. Because we had budgeted as a country to borrow around 1 trillion Kenya shillings. The government, by the close of the last financial year, actually borrowed more and borrowed 1.25 trillion Kenya shillings. What that means is that we are borrowing around 100 billion every single month. And every single day, including today, Monday. By tomorrow morning, the country will have borrowed 3.5 billion every single day. And therefore, every hour we are talking about around 140 million shillings every hour. So we've been here for 2 hours. So we borrowed that much. And you know, many times I think we need to sober up as a country. Because if we don't sober up, the economy will force us to sober up. And when the economy forces us to sober up, it will not be very easy, like giving a speech as I'm doing today. The ramifications will be dire. Maybe what we need to do is to take some of the people from the National Treasury for a benchmarking trip to Ghana. And they interact with real people, not the economy. You know, many times you talk about jargons, GDP and the rest. You now go and interact with a pensioner in Ghana. Interact with a person who had bought government instruments in Ghana, who after they borrowed too much, they had to call borrowers in a round table and tell them, guys, listen, I know I owe you 1 million shillings, but from today I am the sovereign. I owe you only 700. That's what we call a haircut. Okay, take government to court. You are given even something, you have to short a government. Okay, where will you start? Getting a GK vehicle on the road, or where? You see, some of these things, they seem like superlatives, but they are real. The government tells you, you are a pensioner, I owe you this much. But from today, you are taking a haircut of 30%. Haircut means I'm cutting. Not postponing, cutting. Forget everything else, me, I owe you this. That is where Ghana ended. And when you hear us talking about debt, it is because if you reach there, it is catastrophic. And it would affect everyone. And it would affect all the facets of our economy. There is the other thing, so that I wind up with debt. And I'll be very brief today. PS was asked about something I've been talking about called securitization. And when you get a chance, you explain to us based on your experience. There are people who want to tell us securitization, you can treat it as something outside of the debt. You tell us whether that is possible. Because from where all of us sit, it's not possible. You can't have a shop. You are running a shop in Kakamega, a hardware shop. You take a debt from the local bank. You are supposed to service this debt using, of course, the proceeds from your hardware. Then you go to a different bank and say, please lend me money. Part of the things I sell is cement. So I want to securitize what I get from cement. It will come directly to you. That's what is called securitization. If you're not a different bank, you already have borrowed money from bank A. And you are servicing that debt out of the profit from the entire profit from your hardware. Then you get another bank on the side and you tell them the revenue from cement and from steel, chuma, ile nauza, it will now be coming to you. And then you want to tell us that is not supposed to affect this other debt. I mean, I keep saying, every time you hear about a big Kizungu Miki context in Kenya, coming from government, you hear a big name like securitization, it is just supposed to tire you so that you don't question. But something must be happening that is not right. And just do your math, you'll see. I talked the other day about a debt. a debt of a board that was raised by securitizing sports fund to build stadiums. Let me start here. Kenya has always built stadiums. You know, many times you want to appear like we are now, we have innovated ways of building stadiums in Kenya. Kenya has always built stadiums. We have never securitized any revenue. So the issue about building a stadium is not there. The issue is about how are you building. So we end up borrowing around 45 billion Kenya shillings. Whichever method you use, even if you use future value of annuity, or you use a simple arithmetic of interest rate, in 15 years, Kenya will have paid interest rate of over 100 billion on a loan of 45 billion. And those are facts. Then we go and securitize fuel levy. And we say we are building roads with this fuel levy. Let me start here. Kenya has always built roads. All the roads we saw in our villages and estates when we were growing up, it was not black paint painted on our roads. It was tarmac. So it's not a new invention. We have always built tarmac roads. We have always built Mombasa Road is a road that was built many years back. Thika Road, the road to the Western Corridor. It's not new. It has been there. But now, we want to collect money that Kenya is supposed to collect for the next 7 years. We want to collect today and use it today. Now, the government in the ensuing years, what are you going to come to do as government? Many times, people are here politically, there is a way people want people to talk, for example, as politicians. But what is more important to talk as a Kenyan today than about the future of our country? We may talk about leading the country, but which country? First address that the country is there. So when the country is there and functioning, you can talk about the other things. And that is why I think these things are very important. So in a nutshell, this is what I'm trying to say. We are borrowing 1.25 trillion every year, 100 billion every month, 3.5 billion shillings every day, around 145 million every hour, but every road you see in Kenya ongoing is not part of that debt. That is a different debt called securitization of fuel levy. So let no one tell you, we are borrowing this to build roads. No, the debt for building roads is not even there. We are borrowing that money, but when you ask, you'll be told, can't you see we are building even Talanta Stadium? This is the point. The money for building Talanta Stadium is actually not there. It is a different debt, not included in this mainstream debt. The other thing, so that, because it's the same, this issue of debt is big. Now, we want also to expand a lot of things to be seen for optics, as they are also good for the economy. The road from Nairobi to Nakuru is long overdue in terms of expansion. And the people who use that road deserve that road to be dualed. But even the money for dualing Nairobi-Nakuru highway, that money is also not part of the borrowed money, the 12 trillion. That is some other money we are raising through a baptized name called PPP. But that PPP is actually workers' money through NSSF. So NSSF is forced to invest workers' money on a commercial venture called a PPP to build a road from Nairobi to Nakuru. And they are told how to recover their money is to put toll stations, charge motorists, watapata pesa yao hapo. So even the expansion of that road is not part of the borrowed money. So what and again, the Talanta Stadium I talked about, Because private sector is rational. A person in the private sector, when you tell them to invest money, it is me and you here. When I call you to invest in an instrument, you are likely to ask me questions. And because the government did need to answer many questions, that Taranta board I keep talking about, I request all of you to go and check who bought it. The number one investor in that board was again one of the banks I'll not name, which has attachments with government. And the number two was again NSSF. Number three was the superannuation fund, again money for workers. So if you are raising a board that is attractive, why are private sector not buying? That government money through another way, and especially workers' money, has to be the ones now to be put in that kind of radar. These things are important, and if they are good, then the speech today should not be an accusation. It should be just an opportunity for those who did it to come and inform Kenyans better. And many times I wonder, for example, on securitization of the fuel levy. You are a bank CEO, and you committed money for your shareholders and lend, let's say, 50 billion shillings on something called securitization. You have no sovereign guarantee. The 7 shillings on which the money is securitized was just a gazette notice from the minister. If another minister comes tomorrow and writes off the 7 bob, where will this bank, where will the bank recover the money from? If there is other people in terms of policy in Kenya, and they don't honor the debt, there's nowhere you can go. But of course the government did that knowingly because of the urgency of the money. Mabanks na wale wengine wamenunua boats, tutazipanga baadaye. As I go to the finish, the things I talked about, we are in summer, that we have rates coming down from last year, should give us a good opportunity to grow. But how are we growing as Kenya? The Kenyan GDP grew by 4.7%, the previous data that we have for 2024. And by that, we extol that growth. But how is it in the region? Kenya was actually the last in terms of growth in our region. Rwanda grew by 8.9% in the same period. Tanzania grew by 5.5% in the same period. Uganda grew by 6.1% in the same period. So what I'm trying to say is that we have to be logical, everyone who has a position to make decisions for our country. So that even as we give good narratives out there, narratives can only sell up to some point. And then from there, the reality knocks the door. Kenya has the potential to be the leader in terms of economic growth in the region. Currently, we are last in all our neighboring countries. I don't think that is something to celebrate. It is something to call us to wonder. Allow me, it's something I forgot, just 1 minute. I talked about Nakuru, Mausamit Road. I mean, Nairobi, Nakuru Road. I call it that way because it's more identifiable that way. That road is part of the road from Mombasa all the way to Malamba. It's part of it. It's a corridor road. Any person who would do just basic empirical analysis of that road, one thing is clear. NSSF, being the lead investor in that road, will never recover the money. But that road also must not be tolled. Because for ease of doing business, the reason why other economies would do better than us is when investors start choosing those countries better or more than us. When you come and do any part of Mombasa, Maraba Road, basically what you are doing is to increase the cost of business, including for people like our neighboring country, Uganda, who have to import their commodities through us. So that road should be built, and should be built by the internally generated resources which are there. And therefore, The road from Nairobi to Nakuru should be dual, and the residents who use that road should not be made to pay toll on that road. Because we may think it's a commercial venture, but it will come and hurt our economy. Because if in our region the corridor roads are not tolled, you are basically telling people to look for options. And our country needs investors much more even than our neighbors, because our neighbors are growing faster than us. Let me talk about just one specific policy, then I'll be done. My sister asked about, okay, odoheni hii mambo mengi ya huku juu mingi. Now, conceptualize the economy to me. That's how I understand that question. Now, stop talking about all this expenditure, what, this, that. Can you put the economy in a manner that can be perceived easily? I'll just use only one policy instrument that we are doing as Kenya. And then I'll leave it to you to weigh whether it's good or bad. Housing levy in Kenya, I saw the other day that it even surpassed, and we ended up collecting 73 billion shillings on housing levy. I want to be consequential so that we see why it is important to keep on tracking policy instruments, and therefore to see whether they need amendments along the way. After we instituted the housing levy and we started housing projects in Kenya, I'm just using this as an example. So the government is collecting 73 billion, literally taking 73 billion off the pockets from the private sector and households. Now, what is the output? 1 year that is passed, I'm using the recent data that Kenya has is 2024, where even the housing levy surpassed its target. That's the year I'm talking about. Industry in Kenya, industry is viwanda, decelerated. From the previous year where we grew by over 2% based on the year-on-year, on 2024 compared to 2023, we decelerated to the growth of 1.5%. Second, when we are busy building houses through housing levy, as Kenya, through government, I'm using government data, not my data. Government released data from KNBS. The construction sector in Kenya, when Kenya was very busy, the busiest year in building housing, the housing program, the construction sector in Kenya shrank by 2%. Not grew, not even decelerated. It went down by 2% in 2024. The consumption of cement in Kenya, in that year we are building houses, the consumption of cement went down by 7.9%. The consumption of steel in Kenya went down. This is the other thing that can make you sometimes wonder. I have seen government officials, and they are saying the housing project has created 300,000 jobs. Others say 500,000 jobs. Others say this kind of jobs, and they say new. Now, the same government data shows us this. In the year 2024, the people employed in the construction sector shrank by negative 1.3%. And all the people employed in that sector is only 223,400, a less number than in the year 2022 when we never had the housing levy. When am I talking about this? Many times, we may be beating drum on this side for celebration, but the economy cannot be cheated. What this is showing is that the money for the housing levy was more efficient for our economy when it was in the pockets of Kenyans. that Kenyans were building their houses more efficient than how government can build them. Are we getting that? Because the pictures we see on the timelines on Facebook and social media, advertisements of housing projects, then should translate into data. But then we see photographs. But what this has done is to actually remove the people who are working in private-led housing projects. That is the sector we have now come in, as the government has come in, made it shrink, and then out of the inefficiency of government, the same sector leads the economy to lag. So I leave it to you to see. The housing levy, is it more efficient with government, or is it more efficient with the private sector? Or in your pocket to decide how to build your home and to decide how to use it? Because it shows when you had that money, the economy was growing faster. Very lastly, sometimes ile karatasi EPRA wanatumia kutangaza mafuta imeshuka, si iko bei kali hata kuliko ile bei wanashukisha nayo mafuta. Because now I have seen that fuel has now come down by 11 cents for diesel. 11 cents means 0.11 shillings. And for petrol, I have seen it 0.8. If I look, the peak of fuel in Kenya, the peak globally, was in around, for the last several months, was in June, around 23rd, globally. Per barrel, it was around $73. Now we are talking about $63. That is a decrease by 14% in global oil prices. Why is global oil prices decreasing by 14%? And in Kenya, it is decreasing by 11 cents. You know, I talked about this earlier, and I talked about a new levy that was introduced last year. And I saw all ministers come to defend it. Now, please come also defend these cents. Because this issue of fuel prices is not an easy topic. It is very important. Because our factories run on fuel. Our economy runs on fuel. When we keep on increasing the cost of fuel, at any point we get an opportunity, and we do not in commensurate manner lower when the global oil prices are going low, we are basically handing over Kenya to our neighbors. And we are basically handing over manufacturing to our neighbors. We are basically saying we are inefficient in all the facets of the economy that use fuel. Let us be forthright, and we make sure, with the same haste that the government raises fuel prices when fuel prices goes up globally, it should be the same haste fuel prices come down. And we keep on knowing, the more levies we increase, the more cost we put on in terms of fuel, immediately, the more we make our economy inefficient, and we hand over our opportunities to other countries who are neighboring. I thank you very much. May God bless you.
Right, let's give a good round of applause to Honorable Ndindi. I want to invite any media or anyone in the plenary who has a question for him to ask it from here, because he will not be available for another side session. So any person from the media? All right. Okay. That's one. Yeah. Any other? Right, you can come on in.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jimmy Mboko from Citizen TV. A quick question for Mheshimiwa, which is very simple. You served as the budget chair, and the question that I want to know is why the sudden clarity? Why is it that suddenly you were very clear on issues that you sat in a position that you could have addressed these issues? Thank you.
Any more?
Good morning, everyone. I am Brian Jojotino from Nation Media Group, just across the street over here. My question to Honorable Nyoro is, you have come out, not necessarily perhaps in this forum, but previously to speak against the debt appetite that the government has, especially in the domestic market, and we understand that it's crowding out the private sector in its quest to access affordable credit. I mean, if you're a banker and you're getting an assured sum of say 16%, for example, for an infrastructure bond that is not necessarily taxable, then you would rather lend to the government, who is a sure debtor, for example, compared to you and I, who run a very high risk, and you know the politics around risk-based lending in this city. But now the question I'm asking is, we have a budget to fund 4.2 trillion, and there's a deficit. You don't want us to borrow. We need social services, of course, but there is also the need for, we're also trying to avoid austerity measures. What is the proposal of financing this deficit? This budget deficit, I think about 100 billion or so. Thank you.
Any question? Okay. Last one.
Habari za asubuhi. Naitwa Ndindi kutoka idhaa ya radio. Mheshimiwa, tunaelewa kwamba kuna swala ambalo sasa hivi linaendelea na Kenya Pipeline Company, ambapo tunazungumzia kuna baadhi ya wale ambao wanataka kununua kampuni hii kwa manufaa yao wenyewe. Labda ndio uje pia utueleze mbeleni kwamba haya yamelipuka. Labda unaweza waeleza Wakenya what's happening there, because tunaelewa kwamba utajiri ambao uko pale ni wa shilingi bilioni 500, lakini kuna tetesi kwamba yule ambaye anataka kununua ni shilingi bilioni 100. Waeleze Wakenya.
Asante.
I'll answer this, but in case I don't answer sufficiently, I'm not in a hurry. We can do a rejoinder. Jimmy Pogo, thank you very much, because I get asked that question many times. Why are you speaking now? You've been somewhere there and there, and I am grateful you've given me that opportunity. One, let me talk about securitization first. The issue of securitization came on board in the year 2023. The first time it came anywhere in our meetings. And I want to make it very clear so that we have clarity on this issue. That meeting had all the decision makers around the finances of our country, including the CS National Treasury then, and including the PS who is still there now. And I want to confirm to Kenyans, in the meeting I was, we all declined this issue of securitization, because it was common knowledge to all of us that any money you borrow through securitization is a debt, and therefore cannot be treated separately as anything different. And therefore, I think that suffices. I was there, we could not. Secondly, I would request that we all check the reports that came out of the Parliamentary Budget Office in the last 3 years. And you check our stand on debt. And you check our stand on the things I'm talking about. And you see consistency in what we stand for. And even beyond me, even my seniors then, every time they could speak, no one was speaking in terms of borrowing. Everyone was speaking in terms of lowering our appetite for debt. But when it comes to action, there is something different. The last thing, when you are serving in a capacity that I was serving before, just as you serve in any other capacity around government, because as you understand, when in the positions of departmental committees and other committees like the one I was, you work very closely with the National Treasury and the government of that time. There is something called, I would call it collective responsibility. And this is what works politically. In politics, you leave your seniors to talk about all the good things. Because even me as an MP, my CDF chairman leaves me to say all the good things about the work you are doing. And then, do I need to explain further? I think you've got it. So, I want you to check all those, because many times I see people saying, hey, kwani wanaongea sahi? It's because of those reasons. Basically, collective responsibility then permitted, you have to let, I mean, you are not the head of government. You are just some chairman somewhere there. So, we had to do that time. And I'm glad, and I'm sure, Bogo, you are glad, that I've been there and I'm now here. Because at least now I can talk to you freely without having any issue of collective responsibility. And I am glad for this opportunity also, because it helps me to also inform Kenyans in an area I have been and I know. And I don't think it can get better than that. That it is the chef who is telling you about the menu and about the recipe. Bwana Otieno from Nation, I agree with you entirely. The government comes to the market, they borrow. This year they will likely borrow close to $1 trillion in the domestic market. Basically that is money that could have gone to this industry and the other to enhance their production. So that money is no longer available to them because the government has taken it. Because as a banker, bankers choose the low risk, high return. Now that is doing a lot of harm. Beyond crowding out, these are the issue of pending bills is hurting the same banks that are majorly buying the government instruments. Because if you look at the NPLs in our commercial banking sector, you realize they are climbing up. So banks think one of their problems is being solved, yet a bigger one is being created on the side. Because you deny money to the private sector, the private sector denies you money as banks. Because if you give me money, for example, to build this hotel as a bank, and I build it up to the point of just furnishing, and I come to you and tell you, top up my loan, I furnish the hotel. And as the bank, you say, no, the government is here, they want money. You may default, the government can't. So you deny me money. You give this money to government. So all the money I had borrowed from you to put up the structure, then I will not be able to pay you. So that is booked in the books of the banks, commercial banks, as an NPL. So this one side, the commercial banks think they are taking advantage of the high appetite of borrowing locally, but on the other side, it is hurting them directly through NPLs, and especially when private sector cannot pay. But then you asked, where do we get money from? And I'll ask you, money for what? This is the reason. We have a budget of 4.2 trillion. Okay, what is fundamental between this year and last year, for example? If we have an increase of 200 billion, what is this so fundamental that we are doing this year that we are not doing last year, that we have added a budget of 200 billion? I want just to point one thing. Why? Some of the money we are borrowing, Kenya doesn't actually not need it. Here they are experts in the economy. Go and check the budget that we are implementing today. And you realize Kenya has budgeted over 50 billion Kenya shillings for political management. Those who are here, they know what I mean, political management. The money you see being dished out is not grown. It comes from your pocket. And I want you to go check. One of the parameters I saw Kenya was to do last year was to do away with confidential fund. Go check how much money it is in all the areas that confidential fund is. And you realize The money we borrowed for Talanta Stadium, we have also budgeted an equivalent money just for political management. Political management. I'm being diplomatic. Ligan talked about privatization of Kenya Pipeline. There is something I want to put into perspective without going into details. The former president of Zambia was the late Edgar Lungu. The current president is called Hakainde Hichilema. Both two gentlemen are products of privatization. The money they ended up having to be able to marshal a presidential bid and both of them becoming presidents, they are products of privatization. One acted as a lawyer for many transactions. Go check who was a lawyer between the two. The other one used to work for the Big Four and ended up as a TA, transaction advisor. So privatizations are good when they are done without vested interest. When Kenya divests from any assets, it's good. But the problem with Kenya today is that there is a trust deficit. If you ask me, because I am glad to have had some experience in the capital markets. The stock market in Kenya may appear bullish now. Bullish because shares are going up. But companies are still grossly undervalued. Any bank that is listed in Kenya is worth less than a bank that is not listed, of equivalent profitability, of equivalent assets, of equivalent everything. Because the market is not very ripe to value companies upwards. Were it not for the trust deficit, the best route would have been to arrange for a strategic investor. Unfortunately, we may arrange for a strategic investor and the person could be the one next to your table when you are discussing it. So privatization wholesomely is good, but we have to remove vested interest. And the best way to do it is this way. Whatever you value that company, it's okay. Value it even at 1 shilling. But sell all the companies to local individuals who are Kenyans. Then from there, you cut off all the price of any mysterious person. When you say yes, we are privatizing this company, but we have no money to allocate companies or foreigners. We have only money to allocate verifiable Kenyans as individual shareholders. And then you put a cap that you can only invest not more than 1 million shillings in this offering. Then from there, utasikia hiyo, we postpone, we do this, then namna hiyo. Asante.
Thank you very much. Allow us to close the session for questions and answer there. If you want to see him, you'll see him bilaterally. At this juncture, I want to invite Martin to wrap it up for us. And then we'll have a bit of photo ops, so please, our guests, don't leave yet. Martin will be very brief.
To our chief guest, MP for Kiharu, Ndindi Nyoro, our CEO James Muraguri, our esteemed guests, our partners, our stakeholders, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. You have had an opportunity to listen to the media diagnostic report. You have got an opportunity to listen to the panel discussions, and more so the insights from our chief guest, Ndindi Nyoro, and we all come here to a realization that we need something done. And that something will be done by a collective responsibility by all of us in this room. So mine is to sincerely thank you on behalf of IPF for walking this journey with us and for making sure that you are counted in a forum like this that is trying to shape a nation for us and for our future generation. So mine is to just give you an appeal as an individual, organization. Let us get out from this room with our hands up, knowing that it is our job and duty to ensure that we have a future that we can be proud of. Thank you so much. And before I finish, I'll request that we have a photo session that will be guided by our MC, Ruth Kendago. Thank you so much. May God bless you all.
Let us give a warmer round of applause to all of us, to our guests today, to our guest speakers, for the insightful, interesting discussions that we have had. And I do hope that as we leave this room, each and every one of us has picked at least one thing for us to go action, for us to think about, for us to write about, for us to speak about at each and every opportunity that we have. I will take this moment to now welcome our CEO and our chief guest today. We will start with Hugh, and then we welcome our panelists after that.